Hey guys, I'm sorry it's been a while. Um, if you follow me on Instagram, you will probably know why, but I will get into that in a minute. Technically, this is going to be one of my night owl ramble videos, but it's just another one of those rare moments where I was able to record during the day. You might hear some noises from my family out and about in my house, but yeah, other than that. So today we're going to be talking about health, the dark goddess archetype, and shadow work, and mental health, and my own experiences with all of that recently, and how it sort of all ties together. So I really wanted to talk about this just because it's been a whirlwind since hell came into my practice. And I just actually recently had an epiphany where I sort of feel like she's been here all this time, or at least kind of been watching me for a few years. But I will sort of back it up a little bit and first talk about the dark goddess archetype and the correlation with shadow work and how that can be extremely enriching for a practice if this is something that you should embark upon. So there's a book that I believe I still have sitting here. Yes, I do. Yes, perfect. I should have been more prepared, but I never am. um, This book is called Journey to the Goddess, and this is by Jane Meredith. This is the probably the closest thing I can give you guys to a material to absorb that's going to kind of really involve a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. Essentially, this is a book on how taking several different stories throughout mythology of different goddesses who have transcended to the underworld, given up everything, and then come back up. And it sort of goes under the metaphorical lens that when we experience something traumatic or very difficult in our lives, those are our own journeys to the underworld. And once we experience something like that, it changes us forever. Now, there are many, many different stories in throughout various different mythologies and different pantheons where this occurs. Persephone is a perfect example. Itchel is another one. Or Inanna, I think it is. Um, yeah, Inanna is one of them as well. Just to name a few, but I know that there are more than that, and they're prevalent in many different pantheons. And the concept of this and the concept of working with the dark goddess archetype is deeply intertwined with our psyche and deeply intertwined with our subconscious and our traumas, our shadows, the other parts of us that aren't so great. And I have been speaking a lot about shadow work on my channel, and I have been very vocal about my struggles with mental health because I want to create awareness of all of this. And I want to hopefully encourage people. And if I share my story and I made you feel less alone, then I did my job. If I share my story and I encouraged you, then I did my job. That's what I'm hoping to do. So these concepts have been a huge, huge part of my practice. And I didn't really expect them to gain momentum even more so until I kind of thought, I was coasting at a good rate. But then I started to feel Hell's energy and I started to be pulled towards her. And it all kind of picked up rather quickly. I did a meditation with her where I found myself in the North Cascades in Washington, which is kind of one of my like happy places. I tend to envision myself there rather frequently. But I'm sitting here in this forest that has just such profound energy, and I can hear a voice calling me saying, "Come find me." So I find myself in a place that I actually have been before, where I'm looking at this massive rock with this crack in the middle of it. And I'm saying, this thing is like, oh my gosh, probably about 25 feet tall. And in the meditation, I go through this tight cave, through this tight crack, and I am very uncomfortable. It's very dark. There are things that I'm afraid of. There's centipedes, there's spiders. I'm terrified of both. So I feel this fear rising in me, that this primal, just like, I need to run and escape because this is too much. This is too scary for me, but I keep pressing on. And as I come out the other side, I find myself standing in a very dark forest in the middle of the night, and there's snow falling, and it's just unbelievably quiet. Ahead of me in a clearing is a bonfire, and there stood Hell. And I had a wonderful conversation with her, but basically, she has a very loving energy, but it's very intense. And she pretty much said, this is going to be a lot like how you came here. This is going to be extremely difficult, and you will not be the same person when you come out the other side. And it was interesting because it rang very true to that journey to the Dark Goddess. The many experiences that I've had in my life where I have basically just had to go through something and come out and be different and be changed somehow. So I made a space for her at my home. It's actually right there. So she now has her own altar. I had some prayer beads made for her, as you guys saw in my last video, and I welcomed her into my practice. Within a few weeks of doing that, I had one of the worst dips in my depression that I have ever experienced. Part of it was just the timing. I ended up being put on a different medication to combat a mystery autoimmune disease that my doctor knows that I have. And so she thought, okay, well, we'll try this. And within a few weeks, I completely plummeted. I became non-functional. I became horribly suicidal, and I couldn't bring myself out of where I was. It was awful, and I was experiencing psychosis, and it was scary. It was almost a whole week of this until I found the courage to ask for help, and I found the courage to understand that I didn't want this, and that I wasn't always going to be this way, and that I was going to find the courage to come out of something that I felt unbelievably trapped in. Now, the one thing that I do want to say is that this was a reaction to a medication, which I know that people will be very quick to demonize medication or antidepressants, but in my case, it actually just really showed me how the one that I was originally on before I was switched to do this, how much it really actually does for me. Now, they don't work for everyone. They're not for everyone. And some people have had horrible experiences on them, much like I just did with that one. But the one that I'm usually on, it does great. And they can be lifesavers. So I do want to preference that. But back to the more spiritual aspect of this. That was a descent. That was me being pulled down into the very dark places of myself. And I know that was her doing. And to me, a good friend of mine had brought up that it was almost like an initiation. And I know that that was her energy. I can't shake that. And I've been spending the last few weeks kind of wrapping my head around everything that just happened to me, because a lot of it feels very unreal. As soon as I started to become more myself again, and I started to feel inspired, and I started to feel connected to the gods and the ancestors, because while I was going through that, I couldn't hear anything from them. I had nothing. So essentially, it was very metaphorical to having so much stripped away from me, back to this darkness that I don't really even think I have the proper words to describe. But as soon as I started to climb back out of that ladder, out of that darkness, and I started to come back into myself again, I started to be really pulled towards even deeper shadow work. And I started to set up a little bit more in my shadow work journal here, which I actually, before I get too deep into this, I am going to probably do a video where I kind of show you guys this before I have way too much personal stuff in there that I can't like share. But shadow work and the Dark Goddess, the interesting things about that is that you will have experiences much like I did, where suddenly your whole world is turned upside down, and you have to find your way out, find your way, your right side up, find your way out of this fog, this mist. It's remarkable, and it's scary, and it's terrifying, and it makes us face ourselves. And we don't like to face ourselves, especially nowadays. We are not even comfortable with being alone with ourselves. And, we're not comfortable with being whole within ourselves. And I do feel like this has taken me back a few steps with my own personal journey into self-love and acceptance, but I feel like this was meant to happen because we have setbacks and it's not perfect. And those setbacks are okay. They teach us a lesson. But I really can't ignore the fact that my experiences with hell have essentially stayed. I was pulled to her. I started to feel her energy, and within weeks, something like this happened that has not occurred to me. It's not happened to me in a good almost decade. The last time I had a severe episode in my depression was when I was working with the Morgan, who was another dark goddess. And she taught me to pull out of my depression and look at myself in a different way. I had a huge breakthrough working with her. And as soon as that breakthrough happened, she disappeared. And then the Norse god stepped in, and then Freya stepped in. And although this video has mostly been about hell, I do want to also bring in Freya because she is not a dark goddess. At least not considered. She's a goddess of death and war, but she's not really considered a dark goddess. But Freya, her energy, at least to me, she's very loving, but very empowering. Very much I'm going to bring out the warrior in you. The Morgan kind of had the similar energy, at least in that sense. But Freya's definitely not to be underestimated for sure. But I mostly wanted to just kind of come on here and share my experiences with hell, talk a little bit about the dark goddess archetype and my experiences with it and what's been happening with me the last few weeks. Because I know not all of you follow me on Instagram, but I do feel like there was a deep spiritual lesson that can be learned from this. And this is something that I wanted to share because I do think it is a turning point in my practice. And I do think that our mental health, especially those of us who struggle with mental illness like me, there's so much to be said about seeing those lessons in that and wrapping it in with your spiritual practice. It's empowering, it's healing, it's encouraging, and you will find different parts of yourself that you never thought were even possible. So I hope you guys enjoyed this Night Owl Ramble. And I think that's all I got for you tonight, or today. Words. Thank you for watching, and as always, blessed be.